In the last video, I showed you how to simplify square roots like the square root of, let's do 72, by using the product property, which remember said the square root of a number is equal to the square roots of its factors multiplied together. Well, if I can factor 72 to be 9 times 8, and I could factor those even further into 3 and 3 for 9, and 2 and 2 and 2 for 8, any pairs of the factors that I get, I can use when I simplify the radical to be when this pair, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, is just 3, and this pair is 2, and I can't pair up the last square root with anything. So I end up with 3 times 2 times the square root of 2, or 6 root 2. Okay. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you simplify radicals with like fractions. And to simplify fractions in square roots, you need to know the quotient property of square roots. And the quotient property of a square root says that the square root of a fraction like a over b is equal to the square root of a over the square root of b. Up until now, all of the numbers I've shown you how to simplify were just normal numbers, but once we start dealing with fractions and radicals, you also need to know a rule about simplest form, which is that we don't ever leave radicals in the denominator. So no radicals in the denominator. So I'm going to show you how to do a strategy that's known as rationalizing the denominator. Let's think of the square root of 1/2. Well, if I use the quotient property, that'd be equal to the square root of 1 over the square root of 2. Since I know the square root of 1 is 1, I'm just going to put 1 and keep the square root of 2 on the bottom. But I run into trouble because I'm not allowed to have a 2 in the denominator. So we can convert fractions, and we've learned some strategies for converting fractions. Like if you had the fraction 2/3, you could convert it by multiplying it by a fraction like, let's say, 4 over 4 to get 8/12. And 8/12 is still equal to 2/3. It's just got a different denominator, and so it has a different numerator also. Notice that this fraction, 4 over 4, is really like multiplying something by 1. So I could think of this number as 1. And when I multiply things by 1, they don't change. Well, to rationalize the denominator, I'm going to multiply it by a fraction equal to 1, and I'm going to use the radical from the denominator to build this fraction. When I multiply 1 over the square root of 2 by root 2 over root 2, in the top, when I multiply, 1 times the square root of 2 is just the square root of 2. And in the denominator, the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is equal to 2. So all that means is that the square root of 1/2 in simplest form is known as root 2 over 2. Really quickly, just to convince you that that is the square root of 1/2, if I square the square root of 2 over 2 and I multiply it by itself, square root of 2 over 2, well then I would get 2 on top and 4 on the bottom, and that's equal to 1/2. So that is definitely the square root of 1/2. Okay, so let's see, we could use the product property to simplify fractions. Let's find the square root of 2/3. So we'll start with the quotient property, say that that's equal to the square root of 2 over the square root of 3. And then because we're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator, I'm going to multiply using the radical from the denominator, root 3 over 3. And I get on top the square root of 6, which is in simplest form, and bottom 3. So the square root of 2/3 is equal to root 6 over 3.